after the constructive cases are presented by the first speakers, the second round of speeches in every public forum debate are the rebuttals. The rebuttal speech is delivered by the second speaker and is 4 minutes long. Today we're going to discuss the purpose and structure of a rebuttal speech and some rebuttal strategies. The purpose of the rebuttal speech is to attack the arguments your opponents made in their case. You'll primarily be making defensive arguments, though if an opportunity arises for you to make an offensive argument, you should take it. If your team is speaking second in the round, you should always use part of your rebuttal speech to defend your arguments and respond to the attacks your opponents made against your case. We will discuss how to do this in a future video. There are a variety of ways to structure your rebuttal speech, but the easiest way to make sure you're responding to all of your opponent's arguments is to go down your opponent's case in order and respond to each argument. While your opponent is delivering their first constructive speech, you should be listening closely and writing down the main points of their arguments and their important pieces of evidence. Then you should be thinking about what you're going to say against their arguments. Write down next to each of your opponent's arguments at least one, preferably 2 or 3, reasons why they are wrong. You can do this while they're speaking as ideas come to you, during the crossfire between the first speakers, and during any prep time you use before your speech. Make sure you ask your partner for help if you need ideas. When it's your turn to speak, you're going to go down the list of arguments your opponents made and explain each of your responses. It's important your speech is organized, and you should specify which arguments you're responding to. There are a few different types of responsive arguments you can make in your rebuttal speech. First, you can attack the veracity of your opponent's argument. To do this, typically you'll read a piece of evidence that says the argument is not true. You should explain why your evidence is better and more trustworthy than your opponent's. You can also point out a logical flaw in their argument that makes it untrue or unlikely. For example, if the resolution was about Medicare for all, your opponents might argue that passing it would decrease the quality of healthcare. You could respond with the results of a study showing that the quality of care is still high in countries with universal healthcare. Second, you can turn your opponent's argument. This means you're going to argue that what they are saying is true, but it's actually a reason to vote for you. It's sort of like the debate version of making an interception. Usually this involves discussing why their argument being true leads to something bad happening. For example, returning to the example of Medicare for all, the pro might argue that passing Medicare for all would lead to more people visiting the doctor. The con could say, yes, you're right, but more people visiting the doctor will actually lead to increased waiting time, which will be bad for people's health. Third, you can compare the arguments from your constructive case to your opponent's arguments. You can argue that the impacts of your arguments are much bigger or more important than your opponent's. If you have an argument that directly clashes with one of your opponent's points, for example, they say the resolution will be good for the economy, but you say that it'll be bad for the economy, you can use elaborating on your argument as a method of attacking theirs. This is not an exhaustive list of types of rebuttal arguments you can make. You should be creative. Just remember to avoid making personal attacks on your opponents. Those kinds of arguments aren't acceptable in debate. Your goal in this speech is to persuade the judge that your opponents are wrong using defensive arguments and good evidence. That's all that we have for this video. Tune in next time for more discussion of the speeches and strategies involved in public forum debate.